welcome to Macon. My name is Suzanne Wood. I'm the chairman of the Bibb County Republican Party. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. Now, do we know how to show you a good time on a Saturday night or what? Yeah, there we go. We would not be able to have this debate without our volunteers and our sponsors, and I'd like to highlight those just really quickly. Our debate sponsor tonight is Cheddar's Restaurant, and our program sponsor tonight on the gold level is Congressman Austin Scott. On the silver level is Apache Political and Progressive Consulting Technologies Incorporated, and our bronze level is Vivian Childs, candidate for the 2nd Congressional District. She's got a little bit of a crowd here. Mallory Jones, our own Bibb County Commissioner. John Kennedy, candidate for State Senate, District 18. Kara Willis, candidate for Georgia State School Superintendent. Richard Woods, candidate for Georgia State School Superintendent. And House and County GOP. And this is the 4th in a series of debates highlighting our candidates for the GOP primary for the United States Senate. And some of you have already made up your mind on who you're going to support, and that's great. And some of you are still trying to decide who to support. The most important thing is we have to choose the right candidate to defeat the Democrats in November, and we have to choose the right candidate to represent our best interest in Washington. So keep that in mind as you listen and learn tonight. I'd like to turn things over now to John Padgett, who's the chairman of the Georgia State Republican Party.
I've got food poisoning. This has been a really bad day. I was having a tough time until I got here and saw this crowd. My goodness gracious, look around at this. Thank you very much for being here. Welcome you to Macon. This is our fourth Senate debate. And to get us started tonight, I want to call up Josh Macon. He's a senator from our 29th Memorial Prayer. Josh.
Please join me in prayer. Heavenly Father, thank you for the opportunity to be here this evening. Thank you for the glorious day you have made. Thank you for giving us the blessing of living in a country conceived in individual liberty and freedom. Let us be mindful, O Lord, that these gifts do not come without a cost. Let us be mindful that it requires our eternal vigilance to keep this land free. Lord, please bless and protect the men and women who wear the uniform of the United States Armed Forces throughout the world, wherever they are, keeping us free. Please bless the candidates, those who have offered themselves for public service. And please keep watch over all of us after this evening ends and we all go to our respective homes. I offer this prayer in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
I'd like to call on Representative Austin Scott. Please.
Thank you, Chairman. And before I lead you in the pledge, I want to make one comment. Barack Obama can't do near as much damage to your constitutional rights if Harry Reid, who's not the majority leader of the United States Senate. We have seven candidates seeking the Republican nomination for the United States Senate candidate from Georgia. That means that whoever the majority of us vote for in the first round probably won't be our nominee. So I'm officially going to give you 60 seconds to get over it after the runoff's over with and get back to getting this country on track. My point is this: Barack Obama would not be the President of the United States right now if we had been able to get over not having the individual candidate that some of us might have voted for in the primary. So I hope as soon as this thing is over with, and we have our nominee, you'll do just as I will. I'm going to put my bells and whistles on, and I'm going to get out and I'm going to raise as much money as I can for the Republican nominee, and I'm going to get every vote that I can for that Republican nominee. And that, if you will, I hope you'll join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I want to say a special thanks to all of our local party leadership that's here tonight. If you're part of this local party here, particular part of the leadership, would you stand up with you? Wave your hand under the back. Thank you for a great job. Chairwoman Wood and all these volunteers have worked tirelessly the last couple of weeks to host us tonight. They've got extremely tough jobs, and all of them do it because they care about this community, the state of Georgia, and the direction that our country is headed. Thank you for all you do around the year, all during the year, to make this party strong. I can't tell you just how valuable you are and how much of a difference you make in your communities in our state. We're excited about the quality and diversity of candidates vying to replace Saxby Chambliss in the United States Senate. This debate series will provide Georgia voters a wonderful opportunity to interact with the candidates and learn more about where they stand on important state and national issues. I want to give a big thanks to everyone who made tonight's debate possible. Thank you to the media for covering this tonight. It's extremely important. I want to encourage everyone here, once this primary is over with and we have a candidate, encourage you again to go vote. Work for our candidate. We didn't do that in the last presidential election, or some of us did. We got us Barack Obama for 4 more years. Now let me introduce our moderator to you. She's the co-host of Georgia Morning News, along with Tim Wright, and editor-in-chief of ZPolitics.com. I wake up with her every morning on the radio. And then introduce to you Martha Zoller. Thank you.
Thank you all so much for being here tonight. I'm Martha Zoller, and it is great to be here. This is the 4th debate in a series of 7 debates. The next debate will be on March the 29th in Savannah. Then on April the 19th in Augusta. There will be a time change on that debate to 10 a.m. in the morning because we realize that is Easter weekend, so we don't want to have it on Saturday night. But it'll be 10 a.m. in the morning on April the 19th. And then on March the 10th, the final debate in the GOP series will be in Columbus, Georgia, in the town where I was born. So it is great to be there. We're also... May 10th, I'm sorry. Did I say March the 10th? Thank you. May the 10th. March the 10th is like next week. You wouldn't be ready for that, would you? Okay. Also, in April, we'll get you more details to that. There will be a debate in Fulton County that is hosted by the Fulton County GOP, which will be a very large event in Atlanta, in Metro Atlanta. So we're so glad to have you all here today. I just flew in from DC this morning. I was up at CPAC where, believe me, everybody I met was asking me who did I think was going to win this United States Senate primary and who was going to ultimately win in November. Well, I can tell you with surety that the Republican nominee is going to win in November. But I can tell you also that there are a lot of people that would like to see the Democrat give this Republican a run for their money. And I say this usually at the end, but I'm going to say it at the beginning. One of the people on this stage tonight is going to be your Republican nominee. And after the primary and the runoff, they are going to be bruised, battered, and broke. And they will need you to get behind them. I concur with what Representative Scott had to say about that. They will need you to get behind them, and I am going to be spending all the time and treasure and talent that I have to motivate young people and women and minorities to vote Republican, because we have a good story to tell, and we should be telling it. And now I'd like to introduce our panelists tonight. Michael McNeely is the Georgia GOP First Vice Chair. He's a Georgia native, and he grew up in Rennes, Georgia. Graduated from Georgia Southern University with a degree in criminal justice. His life has been focused on a service to God and country. He first learned this principle at church and was reinforced when he became an Eagle Scout, served in the Georgia Army National Guard, and as a police officer in Metro Atlanta. He's currently a Deputy Commissioner with the Department of Juvenile Justice. He's been active in the Republican Party for several years, first volunteered on the re-election campaign of then Governor Sonny Perdue. Michael has been the third and first vice chairman of the Douglas County GOP, the Georgia Young Republicans political director, chairman of the Georgia Black Republican Council, and in 2010 he graduated from the Republican National Committee's Campaign Victory School. He has made television and radio appearances along with being quoted in a number of articles, and in 2013 he was elected the first vice chair of the Georgia Republican Party. Michael McNeely, thank you. Liz Jarvis Fabian is a multimedia journalist, we all have to be these days, and an interactivity editor for The Telegraph and Macon.com. She has been on the front lines and the headlines for more than 30 years and served as the chief Georgia legislative correspondent for WGXA-TV in the early 80s and 90s. She's a former hurricane chaser and news anchor for the Weather Channel as part of the Hurricane Hugo team that earned the ACE Award, cable TV's highest honor. She won many awards and accolades for her coverage of events over the years. She has delivered the news in 4 of Macon's television stations and on AM 750 WSB in Atlanta and on Macon's WMAC and WPGA radio. Over the past decade, she's carved a niche as the Telegraph's premier video journalist. Her reputation for solid reporting earned her the News Talk Central colleagues title of Most Trusted Journalist in Middle Georgia. Liz Jarvis Fabian. Thank you, Liz. We're going to go ahead and bring the candidates out, and then we'll explain the rules of the debate. Candidates? They're working without a net today, kind of like we do on radio. There's no prepared statements that they have made on paper. They do have a pad and a pen to make notes for themselves, but they're not going to be reading from anything tonight. You're going to be hearing them from the heart, and I'm very glad about that. I work without a net every day, and it is a really good feeling. Each candidate will be given 90 seconds to respond to each question. Every candidate will be asked every question. Each candidate will be given 30 seconds for a rebuttal if they are called out by name and at the discretion of the moderator. So we are going to be looking at that, and we haven't really had to use that thus far, but who knows what will happen tonight. Each candidate will then be given a 2-minute closing statement. We will run about 90 minutes from the start of the debate and the start of the first opening statement. Let's just be sure I got everything here. Okay, very good. You know, it's not easy getting older. You know, I'm 54 years old now, and I always have to tell Adam when he prints out this agenda to print it in 18 font. Any of y'all relate to that? Okay, good. I'm glad to hear that. So we will start now with our first opening statement, and David Perdue.
Thank you, Martha. Man, it's great to be back in Macon tonight. I was born right down the street at Macon Hospital. My dad was Houston County School Superintendent for 20 years, and my 87-year-old mother that started the first program in the state for gifted people is here in the audience tonight. I grew up in Warner Robins. I have great memories here, like playing ball in the Macon Coliseum, and yes, New Way hot dogs. I got the real deal values here in the Middle Georgia. The morals, the work ethic, the sense of responsibility. And those are the values I took with me as I built my career around the world over the last 40 years. At Sara Lee, Bonnie and I moved our family to Hong Kong to open their first Asia headquarters. At Reebok, I was president and CEO and led that major turnaround at that great company. At Dollar General, I was the first ever non-family CEO. And we got back to the focus of where they had been years earlier, and that is to focus on their mission of helping people get from payday to payday. And in so doing, we built 2,500 stores and created 20,000 jobs. Those experiences prepared me to be uniquely qualified for what we're doing right now in Washington. I understand the free market system globally, how to generate economic growth, which creates quality jobs. Politicians in this race just don't, because they just don't have that experience. I'm in this race because I think we've got a full-blown financial crisis on our hands, and our career politicians created it. I think it's going to take an outsider to solve this mess, someone that's willing to not get reelected. This election is very simple. If you like what's going on in Washington, pick one of these 4 politicians that have been up there for a while, because you know nothing will change. If you want different results in Washington, we have to send a different type of person to Washington. Thank you.
And one thing I forgot to mention was Andrew, our timekeeper, is on the front row there. It is a 2-minute opening statement or a 90-second answer. He will hold up the yellow card when there's 30 seconds left, the red card when the time is up, and I will ask you to stop when the time is up. You will finish your sentence, gentlemen, when your time is up, and I know not those long rambling sentences, but finish your sentence and then we'll wrap it up. Okay, so we'll go to the first question. Michael McNeely will ask the first question. We'll start with David Perdue.
Oh, I get a second chance.
Oh,
I'll do it better this time.
I'm sorry. Sorry about that. Next opening statement, Art Gardner. Sorry about that.
Thank you, Martha. My name is Art Gardner, and I am not a politician. My grandfather wasn't the president, my cousin wasn't the governor, my father wasn't a senator. I'm 55 years old, been married for 32 years, and we have 3 adult children, one of whom is in the room tonight. I've been working for 41 years, 36 years of that in small businesses. I worked for 10 years as a mechanic, worked my way through Georgia Tech doing that, got an engineering degree from there, went to work at Lockheed as a manufacturing engineer, did that for 5 years, went to law school at night while working at Lockheed, became a patent attorney 26 years ago and started my own firm 18 years ago. We employ 18 people. So I've been working in small businesses most of my life, and I've been a problem solver for 4 decades. In fact, I like to joke that if I can't fix it, it probably ain't broke. Now, I'm not a Me Too candidate. I'm not going to be saying the same things that these other candidates up here are saying. I've got the courage to say that our party needs to go in another direction. We need to appeal to young people in particular to grow this party. And that means that we need to change our direction and our messaging some. We need to do that in order to be able to win elections consistently, not just in Georgia, but nationally, so that we can be an effective opposition to the Democrat agenda, which is going to destroy this country. Now, I'm not going to be telling you things that are based on my reading of polls. I offer you a choice, not an echo. Thank you.
Karen Handel.
Thank you so much. It's good to be here this evening. I'm a business person first, and what I've learned is that results matter. They matter not only in the business world, but they should matter in elected office as well. I have a proven track record of actually getting the job done and putting conservative principles into action. As Fulton County Commission Chairman, I faced a $100 million budget deficit head-on by cutting spending. I didn't kick the can down the road, and I did it without the advantage of a Republican majority. while also cutting the budget by 20%. Results do matter. So let's take a look at Congress. The debt has gone from $4 trillion to $17 trillion in the past 20 years. We're overtaxed and we're overregulated. Tonight you're going to hear a lot of excuses. It's Obama's fault. It's the Democrats' fault. I sponsored bills. I tried. I voted no. Those are all excuses. And the unfortunate thing is that the hard truth is that accommodating Republicans were part of bringing us to the place where we are today. And here's what I mean. My opponents in this race, the 3 congressmen, they are fine men who love this country and love our state dearly. And it's disappointing. It's disappointing to see that Bill and Jack voted multiple times to increase the debt ceiling by trillions. Disappointing, especially when Jack is on the powerful appropriations committee, and he could have been our champion for cut spending. We need to have a strong leader in the United States Senate who is not going to succumb to the establishment, who will not succumb to the ways of Washington, who will have the guts and the resolve to do what is necessary to get our country on a new trajectory. I look forward to answering your questions tonight. Thank you so much.
Derek Grayson.
I hope you don't mind if I don't spend time trying to sell you on conservative ideas. I think most people already know what it is. And my name is Derek Grayson. If you want to know more about me, see me after this event. You can also go to my website, grayson2014.com, and you can interact with me directly. So brass tacks. I'm reminded of a saying that says, you are lukewarm. I would rather that you were hot or cold. Being lukewarm, I would rather spit you out of my mouth. How does that relate to what's going on? I'm not sure if I'm running against Republicans, Democrat rights, or plain old Democrats. It's hard to tell. Why? Because of all the damnable legislation that comes down with Washington. We have social programs that are breaking the back of this country. We have a military-industrial complex on the Republican side that's breaking this country. We have both parties engaged in signing continuing resolutions and raising the debt ceiling. And none of them are fighting for a balanced budget. We have 3 on this stage that have verifiably violated at least our 4th Amendment protections. Now that is unacceptable to me. So why am I running? One, to be truthful, I've lived longer than I'm going to live. That being the case, I'm willing to dedicate the remainder of my life to make sure that your uphill travels are not as steep as my downhill travel, but it's going to take your involvement and your dealing with your blind spots about your God. All you need to do is research them, and you will understand the true nature of what we are dealing with. We're dealing with a government that has run amok and political royals from both parties that are destroying this country.
Jack Kingston.
Thank you, Mark. I worry that the American dream is at peril. I worry that a big, intrusive government with runaway spending is taking away your liberties and your freedoms, and that your children, your grandchildren, won't live in the same America that you and I have lived in. They won't have the same opportunities. I have seen countless pieces of legislation die at the feet of the Harry Reid Senate. I believe that if we're going to turn America around, that the battleground is the United States Senate, and we have to put Harry Reid back in minority status. Now, I grew up in Athens, Georgia. My dad was a World War II veteran, a product of the Depression. Wanted to make sure that we Kingston kids knew the value of hard work and the rewards of working and earning a dollar. My mom was idealistic. She made sure that we got to church on Sundays, we stood up for what was right, and that we knew the difference between right and wrong. Libby and I, my wife of 34 years, have tried to raise our 4 children the same way, with those same Georgia values: frugality, hard work, and idealism. As a member of Pomeroy K. Carswell, a large insurance brokerage firm, I helped grow the business from a small Main Street Quiet Insurance Agency to one of the largest brokerage firms in the state. As a member of Congress, I've fought hard to cut spending. I've cut my own budget, $1.3 billion, and the USDA budget, $3.6 billion. I'm the only one up here who can say that he has cut the federal budget. And having represented Houston County, I have stood in the trenches with Warner Robins Air Force Base. I may be the only one up here who has been to that base repeatedly. I will continue to fight for it. Thank you.
Paul Brown.
Psalm 11, God asked a question. The question is, if the foundations be destroyed, what are the righteous to do? Friends, both parties have been steadily destroying the foundations of this nation. The foundations that in this document, the Constitution of the United States. When I was elected to Congress, I swore to the people of the 10th Congressional District that I would use 4 questions about all legislation. The first, is it constitutional according to the original intent? The second, is it right and moral? Third, do we need it? Fourth, can we afford it? If all 4 yes, I vote yes. If one's no, I vote no. And I'll pledge to you, that's how I'll vote as your U.S. Senator. We've got to return to the foundations of this of the nation, of limited government, low taxes, a vibrant free enterprise system, unencumbered by government taxes and regulation. We've got to go back to a philosophy of personal responsibility and accountability and a strong national defense. We're not spending money where we should, and that's on the military. I'm in the military. I'm in the Navy Reserve today. I was deployed to Afghanistan in 2012 as a medical doctor taking care of sick and injured Marines and soldiers. We're destroying the foundations, and what that's going to do is it's going to mean that our children and our grandchildren are going to live at a lower standard. The out-of-control spending, this unsustainable debt, those are symptoms. The disease is a big government. We must dismantle this big, intrusive government. I want to get rid of the Department of Education and get rid of Common Core. I want to get rid of the EPA and get its heavy boot off the throat of the doctors and our economy.
Thank you. Phil Gingrich.
Now, fellow Republicans of Macon and Bibb County, it's great to be with you tonight. I am a native Georgian. I was born and raised in Augusta, Georgia. My wife is also a native Georgian. Billy was born and raised in Newnan, Georgia. We've been married 43 years. I went to Georgia Tech. I worked my way through Georgia Tech. I went to the Medical College of Georgia. When we finally finished all our training in OBGYN, Billy and I settled in Marietta, where we raised our 4 children. They're all grown now, of course, but fortunately living in Georgia, thank God, with our 13 grandchildren. We've been truly blessed. I had a wonderful practice in Marietta, Georgia for 26 years. I delivered 5,200 babies. My medical practice entailed a total employment base of 15 to 20 people, never any more than that. So I am a small businessman. I was a small businessman. If you add up all those, you don't need calculus, but you come up with 32 years of medical practice. Now I've been in the House of Representatives my 12th year. And I love serving the people of the 11th Congressional District, Northwest Georgia, in the Congress. And I promise you, I will take that combination of experience as a small businessman, as a doctor with compassion, as a compassionate conservative in the House of Representatives, and I will represent your values. I will fight for them every day. And I'm talking about common sense, Georgia, conservative values. You can count on Phil Gingrich to be in the fight, to stay in the fight. That's what I want to do for the rest of my life, to represent you. I thank you for the opportunity. I look forward to your questions.
And now, the first question from Michael McNeely, starting with David Perdue.
Okay, you all hear me?
Yeah, Mike.
All right, good evening. The first question is this. The Republican National Committee came out with its growth and opportunity report last year. Among the many topics contained in it was the need for minority engagement. My question is, once elected, how will your Senate office reflect the diversity of the Republican Party?
Michael, thank you. As I look at this crowd tonight, I think that's a critical question. I grew up in the state. When I got in this race, one of the first things I did is I went to Albany and met with 32 preachers down there. And we talked about not the things that they had normally people talk to them about. We talked about what was important to the people in their churches. And here's what we talked about. 1 out of 3 kids in the United States don't get out of high school. But in their churches, 2 out of 3 boys don't get out of high school. Now that's a tragedy, and we've got to do something about it. My Senate office will be an absolute reflection. If I get elected to the United States Senate, I think there are 10 or 11 million people in here. I fully intend to represent every single one of them. But here's the problem. You're not going to hear me pandering back to you about what I'm going to bring back to the state and what I'm going to do there and what I'm going to do there. I'm going up there to do 2 things. One, to interject this economy back into the debate and break this gridlock between tax increase arguments and spending cut arguments and get this economy going to solve this debt. That's what we can do for every community of Georgia. We are the party of the high ground when it comes to economic opportunity, fiscal responsibility, and small government, and we gave that up. And the very people who are not benefiting from that or being hurt by that are the people that are not in this room tonight by large numbers. And I think we can do better if we just get serious about getting this economy going and solving this debt crisis. Thank you, Wayne.
Thank you. Art Gardner.
I believe the question was, how would my Senate office reflect diversity if I'm elected? And to answer that question, I would say in the same way that my current office does. We include people of color in our office because they're valuable members of our firm. They are important contributors to our firm. And we seek out the best talent, irrespective of skin color or other backgrounds. And I would continue that in the Senate, absolutely, 100%. In part because it's good business, and in part because people demand it. And our party should absolutely pursue that.
Karen Handel.
Thank you. If I have the great privilege of being your next United States Senator, we're going to have a team in the office that is going to be the best, most talented team that Georgia has to offer. Making sure that we have lots of individuals from the state of Georgia, not individuals who are from the halls of Congress and already been sucked in. I want to make sure that people on my team are coming here to Georgia and going to church on Sundays with people like you. I'm also going to be present and around the state, make sure that I stay engaged across the board with everyone in our state, because this, after all, is a job, and you expect for us to work a full-time job on your behalf. And that means not only just outreach to the GOP, but outreach to everyone in the state, because I will be representing Georgia, and my job is to be accountable to you, and only to you, not to the folks in Washington.
Please don't refer to me as a person of color, because under that logic, white people, that's a color too. I just want to make sure you understand that. I'm not waiting. Promises before action. And that's what I've heard thus far. I'm already in the black community because that's where I live. I'm already talking to people about conservative ideals, meeting them where they are, explaining to them that liberal Democrat policies are not working for them. I've been a conservative since Reagan. But here's a problem with the Republican Party. It's all talk and this inclusion. One of my volunteers asked a reporter in this room tonight, hey, are you going to interview Mr. Grayson? And he was told, no, he's not on our list. And there is no outrage from the Republican Party. Hey, listen, there's a national mandate. We need to interview and include everybody. Now, I know they can't control what the press does, but they can at least speak to it. And so I don't want to hear people talk about what I'm going to do if I get elected. I'm doing it right now because this is where it counts.
Jack Kingston.
Michael, as I believe you know, I represent one of the highest minority districts represented by a Republican. I believe that the first district of Georgia is 26 to 28% African American, and I have been successfully reelected by reaching out and talking to people. And I can say this, we Republicans stumble all over this question. They're minorities, just like the rest of us. They want jobs. And if we're going to turn around the economy and create jobs and opportunities for all people, we need to push back on regulations that kill jobs, like Obamacare and Dodd-Frank and EPA stuff. We need tax simplification, and we need energy independence. And that would serve every person in here, regardless of your race. And it's something that we need to do. Now, Chatham County, where I live, went for Obama 55%. I won it by 53%. And yet the National Journal just came out and said I have the most conservative voting record of anyone in this race. I have a 96% American Conservative Union voting record. And yet I got 53% in a county that went 55% for Barack Obama. One thing we absolutely have to do as conservatives, as Republicans, is show up. And I'm very concerned that's what we're not doing. We need to show up and talk hard issues, and I'm confident that the doors will fly open.
Thank you. Paul Brown.
Michael, I think you know my staff, and all you have to do is look at my staff today, and you'll see that I believe in diversity. I believe in hiring the very best people, and I have a lot of diversity within not only my campaign staff, but as well as within my official congressional staff. I'm the We the People candidate. I represent the hardworking people of America, of Georgia. I represent poor people, senior citizens. I represent family businesses, not the special interests. The rich folks, the special interests, have their representatives that pay out all the big money to the politicians. But I represent you, Georgians. Georgians who want to go to work, take care of your family, take care of your job, go home and not have the intrusion of the federal government on your back. So I represent all the people of this country, all the people of this state, not the special interest. I represent Georgians. We've got to stop this out-of-control government because it's hurting all segments of our society. Whether it's the black population, the Hispanic population, the Asian population, the people from Romania and Europe, I represent everybody in this country to stop this out-of-control government.
Bill Hendrick.
Martha, thank you. This report commissioned by the chairman of the RNC, Reince Priebus, and I'm sure thoroughly read by our chairman, State Chairman John Patchett, the need for minority engagement. I could not agree more. We absolutely have to reach out to the minority, whether we're talking about the African American community, the Hispanic community, and it's not, in my opinion, it's not about winning elections. It's because it's the right thing to do. And Paul mentioned the hiring of the minorities. Absolutely. When I become the next United States Senator, I'll guarantee you we'll have that diversity in hiring. And one of the most enjoyable things that I do today, and I still have that active medical license, thank God, that allows me once a month to practice a half a day at the Good Samaritan Health Clinic in Smyrna, Georgia, in my district. And every one of those patients are poor, most of them are Hispanic, most of them are non-English speaking, and the joy that I get in seeing those 6 or 8 patients on that Friday morning once a month, I can't describe it to you. It's better than anything that's ever happened in Washington.
Thank you. Question 2, Liz Jarvis-Fabian will be asking, and we'll begin with Art Gardner.
Robbins Air Force Base is our economic engine here in Middle Georgia. And when we hear talk of another base realignment and closure discussion on the horizon, it makes us a little nervous. What is your defense philosophy and priorities for military spending?
First of all, we need a strong defense. I mean, I think everybody in this room will agree that that is absolutely essential. And so we have to have a strong defense. We start with that premise. However, most people in this room also understand that we face serious fiscal problems. We are going to have to make cuts. 1/5 of the budget goes to defense. 1/5 of the budget goes to domestic programs. 1/5 of the budget goes to Social Security. 1/5 of the budget goes to Medicare and Medicaid. And 1/5 of the budget goes to all other forms of welfare. Now, we're going to have to make cuts. Most of the spending is on the mandatory side. But you're never going to get Democrats to agree to cut on that side unless you are also cutting some in military spending and domestic spending. So we need some sort of rational program to make some cuts in military spending so that we have the political base to go back to the Democrats and say, look, we've got this out-of-control spending on the mandatory side. We've already cut some in the military. Now it's time to turn our attention to the real elephant in the room, which is mandatory spending. So yes, we'll have to cut some in military spending, but that's not where the problem is. We can't balance the budget on the backs of the military.
Thank you. Karen Handel.
Not only can we not balance the budget on the back of the military, we should not balance the budget on the back of the military. We have to be strong in protecting our defense because we need to make sure that our military is strong so that they can protect our people and protect our freedom. I find it interesting that the era of austerity has somewhat ended for most of the other federal agencies, yet defense continues to be the subject of cuts, and we have the legislative plan, which is a disgrace. I'm going to be a strong advocate and a strong partner with our military here in Georgia. We know it's an economic driver, but we also have to make sure that we make the case every single day that our military footprint is vital to the national security of this country. Now, we all know that we need to cut the budget. We have a $17 trillion debt, and if we don't deal with the financial issues here in the country, and we are bankrupt, we won't have a dime to do anything, including fund our military adequately. So we need to get serious about cutting spending, moving to a balanced budget. The ideas are out there. Connie Mack has called for the 1% solution to cut 1% for 6 years in a row when we get to a balanced budget. We can do it. Our military leadership, they know that they're going to work with us to do things smarter and better, but we have to make sure that we protect the overall strong position of our defense. We want to make sure we defend against crack, but we also have to be sure that we are on the ready proactively because it's not just crack. It's sort of this death by 1,000 cuts to our military across the state and across the country.
Thank you. Derek Grayson.
Most of y'all we get is noise. Base closures. People will tell you something that is contrary to the nose on your face. How do I know? In 2006, we had the White House, we had Congress, we had the Senate. They were still closing bases. So whose fault was it then? If we're so concerned about our military and the budget, why not stop some of these damnable wars? If you stop some of these wars we have no business in, I think we can keep our bases open. It's not that hard to grasp people. The priorities of Washington are not with our troops. When you have troops that have a higher suicide rate than civilians, something is wrong. When you have troops that we don't even know are suffering and it has to be leaked up in Walter Reed Hospital, something is wrong. They don't care about the troops. They don't care about these base closures because they were doing it when the Republicans had the lead then. So that is not the issue. The issue is you keep sending the same people back expecting something different.
Mason.
As somebody who serves on the Defense Committee and has represented 5 out of our 8 military installations, I have a consistent record of making sure that our soldiers, sailors, and airmen never have to fight a fair fight. I want them to be the best equipped and the best trained so that they can take on any enemy at any time in any place and that the outcome is known. I don't want to kill a fly with a sledgehammer. I want to kill a fly with 5 sledgehammers because you need to be safe and they need to come home safely to their families. Now, as respects Warner Robins, we need to keep up with what they're doing at Hill and what they're doing at Tinker. There's 3 logistics centers in the country. We need to be competitive with them because that's our matrix. We need to make sure that the proposal to move the Air Force Reserve Command does not go through. If that does, that's 1,400 jobs out of Warner Robins, and that proposal may or may not be allowed. As respects the J-Stars, and I've worked when they set up the blended wing at 116 in 2002, and then when they changed it back to active duty and a reserve unit, I've been part of the J-Stars, making sure that those planes have engines that get them up fast. But now the E-8s are getting old, and it's time to change the platforms and get a business jet platform. And I'm working on that. We have to stay ahead of the curve when it comes to Warner Robins and looking after its future and that great economic engine to Middle Georgia. Thank you.
Paul Brown.
Liz, I'm in the military. I'm in the Navy Reserve today. In fact, I'll be promoted to full commander 05 on April the 1st. I was deployed to Afghanistan in 2012. I was over there taking care of sick and injured Marines and soldiers. Just prior to Thanksgiving, I was talking to a 3-star Army general. He did not have enough rounds of ammunition in his command for all of his troops to go to the rifle range and re-qualify. Our pilots don't have enough jet fuel to fly today. They're having to stay qualified in their aircraft by flying simulators. Under the Constitution, a strong national defense should be what we're spending money on. And we're not. I'm a U.S. Marine. I'm a Marine in sailor's uniform now. But we don't have enough Marines. We don't have enough ships in the Navy. We don't have enough wings in the Air Force. We don't have enough brigades in the Army. We're not focusing upon our troops. President Eisenhower warned us of the military-industrial complex. The military-industrial complex must stop dictating military policy. Our troops that are in battle situations around the world need to have all the resources that they need. My philosophy, priority is going to be when I get to the U.S. Senate, the very first committee that I'm going to request to be on is the Senate Armed Services Committee so that we can continue to have a strong national defense.
Bill Gingrich.
What a timely question. And is it any surprise when we nominate and approve a Secretary of Defense named Chuck Hagel, who we knew, the Republican members of the Senate knew that when they served with him, he was a former senator, that he was dovish on the military. And yet, instead of standing in the breach and fighting and maintaining that hold on him so that Obama was not able to make him Secretary of Defense, they stood back. I guess because of former colleague. You scratch my back, I scratch yours. And now this is what we're getting. Now, I'm not saying that there shouldn't be any cuts to the military, but not with a shotgun blast, with a rifle approach. We don't want to hollow out the military. But the question, of course, in regard to the possibility of another branch, and it scares me to death, and it should scare you, Middle Georgia residents, those of you, some of you work at Robins Air Force Base. As Jack said, one of 3 logistical bases in the country. They've downscaled the billet as far as the commander there. And that's a real concern. And a recent Air Force Study Commission wants to make those bases active duty. For what reason? Not to save money, but to put them on the chopping block in the next bracket. Governor Deal has already got a team in place. I will work with Austin Scott, my colleague here in the 8th. We will stop that.
Thank you.
Our Constitution cited 6 reasons why we formed this perfect union. Number one thing was to provide for the national security. We dealt with the Soviet Union in the 60s. I was a small kid, and I remember the Cuban Missile Crisis, watching those B-52s and KC-135s take off every 3 minutes at Raleigh. I grew up in that town. I know how important it is to this economic community, but even greater than that, its mission in terms of securing our national security is too important to put it at risk. Let me tell you what the problem is, though. The reason you need a strong military is not to go build nations, it's to provide for our own national defense. And we need a strong foreign policy which demands that you have a strong defense. But to have a strong defense, you have to have a strong economy. We dealt with the Soviet Union from a position of strength in the 60s and 80s to today, just like in Jimmy Carter's era. We're dealing with Russia today from a position of strength, from weakness. And my problem with that is, until we get serious about stopping the borrowing 35 cents of every dollar we spend, we're going to continue to be in a situation like this. Taiwan has a treaty with us, where if China invades Taiwan, we have to go to Taiwan and defend Taiwan against China. But to do that, we have to borrow money from China to go to Taiwan and defend it against China. It'd be humorous, except that it's so sick. That's where we are in this country. We need new leadership to solve that problem. Thank you.
So what we're going to ask is Art Gardner, if you'd be a gentleman, and if y'all could share that wireless mic, so maybe you could hand it off to her when you're done. Will that work?
That's
Great.
fine.
Thank you very much. And I knew he would do that, so that's good. So do appreciate. We'll go to the third question. Michael McNeely's asking the question. We start with Karen Handel.
Everyone knows that the economy and jobs are 2 of the top issues facing Georgia and the country, and some of you have already alluded to that. What experience do you have regarding both of those issues, and what types of reform do you think the U.S. Senate could pass to get our economy and country moving in the right direction?
Thank you very much. I'm a former president of a Chamber of Commerce, and part of the job as CEO of a Chamber of Commerce is to do economic development, and I was directly responsible for bringing hundreds of thousands of jobs to the North Fulton region. What we need to do to get this economy going again is a couple of things. One, we do need to cut spending. We need to get serious about that and balancing the budget. But we also have not had tax reform in nearly 30 years in this country. 30 years. We have the highest corporate tax rate of any industrialized nation in the world. I support a consumption tax so that we scrap the IRS, repeal the 16th Amendment, and get moving with the fair tax. And when we're finished with that, we've got to deal with the regulatory climate. Companies spend $1.8 trillion a year for regulatory compliance. They are overregulated, and on top of being overregulated, the regulators have become punitive in their approach on corporate America. If we want to get good quality jobs created again in this country, we need to have lower taxes and less regulation. And the last piece is to restore trust in the institution of government. Companies can deal with a lot of things, but uncertainty is one that scares them, and it makes them hold their dollars on the sidelines. We need to have new leaders in Washington, individuals who understand that when they have policy in front of them, it's not just words on paper. There are real impacts for families and businesses across this state and across this country, and we need individuals with a business background who understand those implications. Thank you.
When I was in boot camp, if you couldn't fold your t-shirt correctly, it could cost you 10 weeks instead of 8. Because you messed with some serious equipment, you couldn't follow instructions, they didn't want you handled. We have people on this stage that can't even honor the time, yet we want to send them to try and deal with our budget. The problem with what's going on with our economy is that we have legislation that has allowed for the exporting and offshoring of jobs overseas. Why? Because our senators are not protecting the rights of the state. They have yielded their authority, the will of the people within the state, to that of the federal government. We got the EPA, and I can go on and on and on. We need the federal government to simply get the hell out of the way so that we can do what needs to be done, because we used to be a country, a nation that went out and built things. But now when we try to build things, we got legislation that gives us all types of regulations, all types of taxes, business licenses, the whole 9 yards, and then there's 30 jobs overseas. Go the alternate pattern of look at the blind spots and get rid of them.
Thank you. Thank you.
Four things you need to turn the economy around and help foster the job creation in the private sector. Number one, you need to stop the regulatory overreach. Whether it's Dodd-Frank, whether it's Obamacare, whether it's the EPA, the bureaucracy is keeping investment capital on the sideline. Number two, you need to have tax simplification. Whether it's Herman Cain's 999 or fair tax or flat tax or Dave Camp, we need to get the debate going. Number three, we need to have energy independence. Just think, remember that when gas was $1.90 a gallon, we got a new president. And now, if you see it for $3.15, you slam on your brakes and fill up the Suburban. The reality is, we need to be exploring our own energy resources. And number four, you need to have a job-ready workforce. You need to have job training, a work ethic, and educational opportunities for everyone. Now, I was the vice president of a large regional insurance brokerage. I was on the board of directors. I saw what regulatory overreach did to us, and I never forgot that when I went to Congress. My National Federation of Independent Business rating is 100%. My U.S. Chamber of Commerce is 92%. No one has fought harder for jobs, particularly when it comes to our military cities, towns, and counties, like the ones in Middle Georgia, the ones that have to do with agriculture, and the ones that deal with the Port of Savannah and import and export. Thank you.
And the name that was mentioned was Herman Cain, which doesn't get a rebuttal, but I think we ought to give him a round of applause. That's one of the good things about being a moderator. All right, Paul Brown.
Michael, my jobs bill would bring millions of new jobs back to America. What it does is it permanently reduces taxes on our job creators. I was talking to one of the famous economists about dynamically scored. In other words, what would be the economic repercussions of the jobs bill? It would infuse over $2 trillion, it's estimated, into our economy overnight, real money. And it would also bring manufacturing back to this country. But let me give you an example of what I've been doing. Anytime I meet with an executive of any company in Washington, I try to sell them on coming to Georgia. One November, a couple of years ago, I talked to one group of executives, and after talking about their political issues, I said to them, y'all's international headquarters is up in Illinois. The weather's up there is awful. You have to pay a lot for energy. You have a tremendous labor cost. Why don't you move to Georgia? He said, I don't know, we're thinking about moving the whole thing, but we are thinking about moving a company back to the state of Georgia. So I put on my salesman's hat. When I got through telling them about why they should move to Georgia, I asked him if I gave him the governor's contact information, could we have the governor call him? 4 months later, we broke ground with Caterpillar here in Georgia.
Thank you.
I started that process, an opportunity in that law.
Phil Gingrich.
The question, of course, is what can the Senate do to get our economy going again? Approve the Keystone XL pipeline right now. And have natural gas shipped to the Ukraine and to the European countries and let Vladimir Putin eat mud. That's what we can do. We can create 120,000 jobs by approving the Keystone XL pipeline. We can produce tons of jobs by the RAINS Act, which was passed by the House of Representatives and is sitting on Harry Reid's desk. And that says that members of Congress can have a resolution to suspend any rule or regulation that's passed by a federal agency if it costs more than $100,000, $100 million a year to the economy. But last but not least, we need to repeal Obamacare and replace it right now.
Thank you. David Perdue.
Thank you, Michael. I think this is the #1 question in this campaign, and I think you agree with me. Everywhere I go, I ask people to raise your hand if you know somebody's been out of work for the last 6 months. And every time every hand goes up, I ask these young people the same question. But nobody up here, this is what's the problem with politics. I'm not a politician, so I can poke fun here. Nobody answers the question. I've got 40 years of real experience in the international global businesses. I know what it takes to generate economic growth. That's the only way you create more jobs. The problem right now is that 1 out of 5 Americans are out of work or underemployed in this country. And yet, our Federal Reserve has pumped $3.5 trillion in this economy in the last 3 years. We should be booming right now. Why are we not? Because of the fiscal policies of this administration and this Congress. It's very simple. If you want to look at what to do with this economy, you've got to get these government policies corrected. And here's very simple. You're going to hear a lot of pandering about these, but these are economic truths. If you get this tax code fixed, and I believe in a consumption tax, we have a great inequity right now competing with the rest of the world. That's one reason we lost manufacturing over the last 30 years. Get these regulators, Obamacare and Dodd-Frank, haven't started talking about Dodd-Frank yet. Energy policy, I can talk all night about that, but we have not had an energy policy since the gas line in 1973. Infrastructure, we're spending 1/3 of what we should be spending in infrastructure. We're trying to do this for 17 years. And the last is education. I'm convinced that we're really not solving our problem with education today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I've spent most of my life in small business, and I know, as most of you do, that most jobs in this economy historically have been created in small business. And in recent years, that trend has reversed. Small business is not creating the majority of the jobs, and we need to fix that first. And to do that, we need to stop favoring big business over small businesses. Too many times we put in place tax plans and regulatory frameworks that are appropriate for large businesses, but really hurt small businesses. We need to get off the back of small business. We need to simplify the tax code. But we do not need a consumption tax. The people on this stage who think a consumption tax will work are dead wrong. The consumption tax would have to be extremely high, much higher than the number that's put in those books, and it won't work. There'll be tremendous fraud. People on a fixed income will be devastated by that tax. People who are millionaires who've already made lots of money will be fine, but the rest of us will hurt. So if I'm elected to the Senate, one of the things I would want to do is get on the Small Business and Entrepreneurship Committee, because that's how we can fix this country. We can get the economy going again.
Thank you. Question 4, Liz Fabian will be asking the question. We will begin with Derek Grayson.
Just 2 weeks ago, about 3 miles from here, a 16-year-old black boy was shot dead on a Little League ball field. A 17-year-old and a 15-year-old have been arrested. President Obama has just unveiled his My Brother's Keeper program. Is there anything that the federal government can do, in your opinion, to turn this tide of youth violence that's frightening our community?
The federal government, they're the ones that created this violence. It was the welfare state in the first place that brought about the division of the black family. How can you expect a child with no father to understand what it is to be a man, what it is to be responsible? You have teenage pregnant. You already know that story. Bottom line, the federal government wants to engage and are looking for an excuse to infringe upon our rights to bear arms by any means necessary. Black people have been killing each other with high-capacity magazines and automatic weapons for the last 20 years, and nobody batted an eye until white children started getting killed. This is not about crooks. This is not about crime. This is about those that own the most guns legally in this country, and that is middle-class white America. So let's not be confused about the underlying agenda in this process. If they were that concerned, they should have been dealing with Chicago 5 years ago. They should have been dealing with Detroit. But nobody addresses those issues, so I'm not impressed.
Thank you. Jack Kingston.
We need to have tax and welfare policies that encourage the family to stay together. And right now we have tax and welfare policies that encourage the breakup and the demise of the family. Often in a housing project, if the dad lives at home, then they lose their eligibility for the housing project because of the income. It's ridiculous. The child tax credit, which is there to help parents afford to have kids, it's abused. Give me an example. If you're an illegal worker, you can claim the child tax credit. And last year, one household in Ohio claimed 28 children in Mexico, by the way. The cost of that is $4.6 billion. $4.6 billion that could have been gone into education and healthcare programs and anti-drug programs, things that would have strengthened the families that are out there on the edge. And there's so many things we can do on a common sense basis. But I'll say this, it should be led from local participation and not top down from Washington, D.C. You can do it here in Benton County, probably a heck of a lot better than we can from Washington, D.C. Thank you.
Paul Brown.
There's the first thing that we can do to stop youth violence is give them a job. We can do that by passing my Jobs Act, and y'all can help with that by putting me in the U.S. Senate so we can get that moving. The other thing, we've got to build families. We've had federal policies that have divided families. I think one of the worst things that's happened to the American family is the idea of no-fault divorce. And I've been there. It's not right. We have to strengthen families because the youth violence comes from kids that are growing up without a mom and dad in the same family. But that's not a federal problem. That's a societal problem. And the best way to do that is to create a strong economy. Give everybody in this country the opportunity to have a good paying job. And also offer people a good education so that all children in this country have the opportunity to have a good education so that they can get a good job. The way to do that is get rid of the Department of Education and put the education back to the federal parents. So there's not a federal solution, no. In fact, the federal government's the problem. We've got to dismantle this federal government that's too big and too intrusive. That's the problem. So by dismantling the federal government and getting a strong economy, start paying down this unsustainable debt, create jobs for all Americans, we will stop this youth violence.
Thank you. Bill Gingrich.
Well, thank you. You know, I got criticized several months ago for suggesting that a child does best when raised by a mom and a dad. And the statistics prove that, absolutely prove it. But the federal government has done nothing but attack. They attack me, the liberal media attack me on that. They attack the Boy Scouts. They attack the Girl Scouts. They attack Big Brothers and Big Sisters, boys clubs, girls clubs, 100 Black Men of America, instead of supporting and understanding that that's what the youth need. And this Hollywood crowd continues to put out the trashiest videos, movies, rap music. And what does the federal government do about it? Nothing. Nothing. And I'm sick of it, and I know you're sick of it too. It's got to stop. And now, of course, President Obama wants to increase the minimum wage to $10.10 an hour when only 5% of people receive the minimum wage. And you know who they are? They're these young people that you're talking about. And you raise the minimum wage and these fast food restaurants quit hiring. And then what do these kids turn to? They turn to the street. They join gangs. They get involved in selling drugs. This has got to stop.
Little bit of sound issues, so just be sure you're as close to your mic as you can as you're speaking. I know that we're trying to deal with a couple of things here. All right, next one, David Perdue.
Thank you, Martha. You know, one of the most devastating things to anybody, you and me included. Sorry guys, I didn't think you were listening anyway. Just rattling on here, I apologize. If you lose hope, your life changes dramatically. One of my first jobs was in a Head Start program. I watched kids and mothers and grandmothers who had no hope. That changes you. Later in my career, I was chairman of the National Commission on Adult Literacy. Most of us in this room have no idea of what disenfranchisement means. You're talking about kids who have no hope, no place. This economy, this nation, this sociological institution, the richest country in the history of the world, has a growing disenfranchised group of people. It's not just black kids. In my hometown, I can show you a lot of places right now that are devastated, have no hope. Why? Because there's nothing there for them. You realize our education system is partly to blame, but also our social institutions. 1 out of 3 kids don't get out of high school. Now, what kind of future do you have if you don't have an education? Our 2-year colleges right now, kids with those degrees, unemployment is only 2%. It's basically full employment. My answer to this right now is basically get this economy going, create economic growth, create valuable jobs, and get these kids working, and that's exactly what they want long term. The American Enterprise Institute actually did studies that said that work creates better life for them psychologically than any other thing they can do. Thank you.
Art Gardner.
Thank you. Youth violence is primarily a function of poverty. Not entirely, but primarily a function of poverty. And I agree with Mr. Grayson's statement that a lot of poverty is caused by the welfare state. And in fact, the best thing that we can do for people to stay out of poverty is encourage them to finish school, get married, stay married, have children, in that order. If you do that, you can stay out of poverty. If you vary from that, your children are going to grow up in poverty more likely than if you don't do that. And unfortunately, the welfare state encourages people to not get married at the bottom of the social spectrum. So we need to reform welfare drastically so that it does not discourage poor people from getting married, because it does right now. And I have to disagree with the Congressman's statement that we need to reform the divorce laws in this country. The divorce laws are not contributing to this problem. I totally disagree with that. We don't need that sort of intrusion into our freedoms to address this issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Karen Handel.
Thank you. Thank you. Gosh, what a truly devastating tragedy, and I'm sure that our hearts go out to all of the families involved. As you've heard up here, and I agree with this, that the federal government really isn't going to be able to solve all of this. The real solutions are in our communities and among our churches. I think that at the government level, what can happen is first and foremost, get the federal government out of the way of educating our children. Let the states drive education policy here. We've got charter schools coming all around our state. Make sure that we're being supportive of homeschooling, but most importantly, make sure that we are showing a path for the future to these young people who may be in poorer communities so that they can see that a future is ahead of them. I know as well as anybody what it's like to be in an uncertain environment. When I left home at 17, I was one of the lucky ones. I got a skill when I was in high school and I graduated from high school. I typed 100 words a minute. I still type 100 words a minute. But the best thing that the federal government can do is get this economy going again so that young people have an opportunity to pursue their American dream. And we are only going to do that if we put new leaders in Washington who will be serious about cutting spending, dealing with the debt, rewriting this tax code, and reducing regulations so businesses, small and large, can grow again and create quality, stable jobs.
McNeely. We'll begin with Jack, make sure Jack Kingston. I want to make sure that's the hardest part of being a moderator, is getting this order right. Jack Kingston's next.
On Tuesday, Vice President Joe Biden was in town raising money for Michelle Nunn. On that same day, President Obama released his 2015 budget, which stripped funding for the deepening of the Savannah Harbor. What advice would you give to Michelle Nunn and the Obama administration over this well-calculated political game that could cost Georgia over 350,000 jobs?
Michael, I'm not in the habit of giving Michelle advice. But I will say this. If you want to know the difference between Democrats and Republicans and you want a reason to vote Republican, Vice President Biden gave it to us the other day. He comes to town, he comes to Atlanta, having promised repeatedly that they were going to fund this project. And I'm telling you, I was there. If this was the river, the front row would have been where he was standing. No offense to my friends on the front row. But he said at that point, come hell or high water, we are going to make this project happen. What are we here for? Then he comes to Atlanta, cuts the funding for it, and our Democrat presumptive opponent's only comment was, she mentioned it to him. I would have been out there and said, Mr. Vice President, I appreciate you coming down here, but your presence is hurting me at this moment. Let's go out and make a public statement as to why we need to dredge that river. And let me say this, 352,000 jobs are related to it. The cost-benefit ratio is $1 down and a $5.50 return. If we get this done, 62% of what goes out the door in Savannah is export. It will leave jobs for all over Georgia. It's a great project. I introduced a bill in 1999 to get this done. $48 million worth of studies later, the federal government finally says yes. And I want to end with this. We'll get the project done. We'll get it despite the White House, but it will happen. Thank you.
Paul Brown.
Folks, this is one area where every single Georgia, whether they're Democrat or Republican, have agreed. Our governor, a Republican, the mayor of Atlanta, Seem Reed, a Democrat. Every single one of the congressional delegation, Republican and Democrat alike, have all of us been fighting to get the Savannah port deepened. It's absolutely critical. But we need to do more than that. And I don't hear anybody talking about the rest of the infrastructure that we need to put in place. Because what we have to do, what I've been fighting for, Michael, is not only deepening the harbor, but what we've got to do is we've got to provide a 4-lane interstate type access to north-south interstate highway. So we already have US 25 from Savannah to Augusta that is in that, fits that description. But then we've got to 4-lane 17 from Augusta up to I-85 and 441. But then more than that, we've got to develop an east-west corridor from I-75 over to I-85, say from Gordon County to Franklin County. And all those things together will bring a tremendous amount of economic boom here to the state of Georgia. But not only to Georgia, for the whole state of Georgia, but also for the whole Southeast. It's a national security issue. It's a military issue so that we can be able to have our troops come in and out of Savannah. But all of us are fighting to deepen the Savannah port.
Thank you. Bill Gingrich.
Vice President Biden says a lot of things. But for him to come down here with Michelle Nunn and say, we're going to dredge the port of Savannah at Garden City, come hell or high water. That was the quote. And within 24 hours, I guess hell and high water came. The governor has done a great job. I really commend Governor Deal. I mean, we have, I think, something like $240 million ready to go. That's our share of this project. The government's share is about $450 million. How much are we getting out of this? At best, $1 million. A pittance, a token. But I do commend the governor. He wants to start right now, use our own money, and drag the federal government kicking and screaming. Maybe once we get a Republican Senate and we get a Republican president in 2016, that'll all change. But in the meantime, I commend Governor Deal. We're going to pass that water bill. It's stuck in a conference committee now, and the problem with that is the Corps of Engineers is saying to the governor, we will not allow you to even use your own money until that bill passed. The language is in there. We put the language in there. And as Paul said, and Jack, we've worked hard on that. Not just the Republicans, but the Democrats as well. We are going to get this done.
David Perdue.
No, folks, I'm sorry. If it took me 17 years to do something in business, I'm afraid I wouldn't have had a very good career. It's taken us 17 years to get the EPA approval. That's an indication of so many things. It's a government that's out of control, no question about it. This president couldn't get cap and trade passed, so he turned the EPA, told them to kill coal within the year they did. Where were our elected officials in Congress? Where were their oversight responsibilities? What were they doing 3.5 years ago after Obamacare passed? What have they been doing for 3.5 years, not telling us that my personal insurance was going to get canceled? I was on that Port Authority. I understand what's been going on down there. And it's unconscionable that it's taken us this long. An economic engine like that, it needs to be invested in. Here's the bigger problem. Why? Because we've got to get this economy going to solve our debt crisis. This is just one of many. We're spending 1/3 of what we need to be spending as a country just to maintain our infrastructure, not to compete with China and India and the other countries in the 21st century. We've got 1/3 of our budget right now is borrowed. We've got to realign, zero-base this thing out, budget to priorities, and look at what is required to get this economy going, which means you have to invest in infrastructure. Here's the problem. You have to put a different type of person in Washington to break through this malaise and acceptability that 17 years is okay. And that's why I'm running for this seat. Thank you.
Art Gardner.
We have to ask ourselves, why did President Obama do this? Why did he do this? After all these years of working with our governor, our congressional delegation, why did he do this now? He did it to hurt these three gentlemen on the end of this podium. He did it to hurt our congressman in this race. He did it to make our congressman look less effective so that Michelle Nunn has a better chance in this race. That's why they did it. It's purely politics. And it makes me mad as hell. It really does. Because that court deepening is needed for our state. It's needed not only for our state, but for the entire region. And it's outrageous that the administration would do that to hurt our state, to try to better the chances of Michelle Nunn in this race. And so I'm calling on all Republicans, no matter who ends up with this nomination, to make sure that you all vote and that Michelle Nunn does not benefit from this terrible thing. Thank you.
Thank you. You know, obviously playing politics with something that is this important, not just to the state of Georgia, but frankly to our entire country, is absolutely unacceptable and unconscionable. But I guess I'm still stuck on trying to understand why it's taken since 1999 to get the job done. As a business person, I can tell you, the CEO of CBavision,
he didn't give me 15 years to do my job. And when I was trying to turn around the Chamber of Commerce and move it out from the brink of bankruptcy, I didn't have 15 years to do it. We need to have individuals who are going to be focused on results and getting the job done. I have a track record of doing just that. When I was elected as chairman of the Fulton County Board of Commissioners, it was a Democratic majority. I faced a $100 million budget deficit. They had a $3 million property tax increase on the table. No one thought that I had a chance of turning that back, but I did, because I was smart and strategic, and I understand how to get things done in the toughest of environments. When photo ID was hung up in the courts, no one thought I could get photo ID implemented in a way that would address the issues in the courts. I got that done as well and was able to cut the budget in the Secretary of State's office by 20% as well. We need results-oriented people who are going to get the job done, put getting results first, and not worrying about the politics of getting reelected.
Thank you. Derek Grayson.
There's a common thread to this problem that many of us. Hello?
Get right up on, pull it out, get right up on. Yep.
Can you hear me now?
There we go.
There's a common thread to this problem that many of us overlook. We hear these representatives, senators say, we will create jobs. We'll bring a jobs bill. The government doesn't create jobs. We do. That's not their job. Secondly, they want to repeal Obamacare and replace it with something else. I don't want you in the healthcare business. That's not what you would sit there to do. So where are we with this rip? The problem is they keep asking the federal government. This is the state of Georgia. I thought we could do what we wanted to that was best for business for this state without having to ask the federal government. That is where the problem starts, because we have yielded our sovereignty in terms of doing what's best for this state ourselves. Why? Because we want their money. Let them take their money and let us use our own and get it done.
Thank you. And this is the final question, and we will go to 1 minute answers on this. 1 minute answers on the final question, and then we will go to the 2-minute closing statements. Liz Fabian is going to answer the question. We'll be starting with Paul Brown.
You're in the Bible Belt, where Macon has been dubbed having the most churches per capita than any other city. At this week's CPAC gathering, Mike Huckabee said, if America forgets God, then God will have every right to forget us. What role does faith play in your life, and what should be done to protect religious freedoms?
Liz, religious freedom is one of the guaranteed, protected, God-given rights that we have as a people, and we must never, ever lose our religious freedom. Just like we must never, ever lose all of our God-given rights, such as your individual right to own a gun. We've got to go back to the Constitution as our founding fathers meant for it to be, which means very limited government. Ever since I've been in Congress, what I've been doing is fighting to dismantle this out-of-control government. It is robbing our children of their future. It's robbing us of jobs and a strong economy. We've got to dismantle this federal government. And we've got to go back to the Constitution so that we can maintain those rights that Thomas Jefferson talked about when he said, we hold these truths self-evident, that all men are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights amongst these life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. I'll always fight for those things.
Bill Gingrey.
The question is, I think, what role does God play?
In 1 minute.
And I'll tell you, I ask God every day to make me do this for the right reason. And it's not about me, it's about you. It's about your children, it's about your grandchildren, but it's about you. I don't want to see you outlive your money. I want to protect your Social Security. I want to protect your Medicare. I want to get rid of Obamacare. And I want to do this work for the rest of my life. Thank you.
David Perdue.
My 87-year-old mother is a genealogist, and she tells me that we were Huguenots. You know what that is? They came here because they got kicked out of France, then they got kicked out of the UK, and we came here for religious reasons. It's beyond my memory, but that's what she said. The First Amendment is why this country was formed. Then we talked about the national defense, the welfare. The First Amendment should be sacred to all of us. We should be ready to fight for that. Here's the problem. We've let our politicians put that very sacred item at risk. We have $100 trillion in liability. $17 trillion we know about, another 86 coming at us like a freight train. We've got to get serious about putting fresh eyes up there, determination, get this thing solved, or we're going to lose our rights under the First Amendment. And we need fresh people up there to do that. Thank you.
I have a deep and abiding faith. But I don't parade it around in my campaign materials. You won't see it in all of my literature, not featured prominently on my website, because I don't believe that my faith should become the basis for law, either in Georgia or in the nation. I don't want my faith to be imposed on other people or vice versa. But I'll work tirelessly to protect our precious religious freedom because we need it desperately. But again, I won't impose my faith on anybody else, and I don't think that anyone's faith up on this stage should be the basis for law.
Thank you. Karen Handel.
Thank you. You know, my faith is what I turn to for strength and wisdom and guidance. My faith, I look to it to help me in my words and my deeds. Religious freedom, I was at a lecture about actually the Obama healthcare tax, and an individual in the lecture said the following. He said that religious freedom is not a byproduct of liberty. Religious freedom is a prerequisite of liberty. That is how strongly I feel about protecting religious freedoms in our state and in this nation. Thank you.
Darren Grayson.
My Christian faith is personal to me. My personal faith is personal to me. If you want some, meet me after this event and we can pray together. But if you send me to D.C., there's only one thing I'm taking with me in order to represent this state of Georgia, and that is 100% of the Constitution, 100% of the time. That is all I need to do my job as a senator.
Jack Kingston.
Enthusiastically support the First Amendment. Libby and I go to Christ Church in Savannah. It's the church we were married in. It's the church we raised our children in. I've never forgotten who I was, where I came from, or what I went to Washington to fight for. And I will never quit fighting for your right to worship how you want to worship. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we will have our closing statements. We will begin from the right to the left. So we will begin with Representative Bill Gingrey. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, and thank you all for being here. This is the most important election in my lifetime, and it's not just because I'm running for the United States Senate. I want you to think about some statistics. In 2016, I think there are 21 Republicans up for re-election, and a lot of them represent blue states. We have the greatest opportunity ever to take over the Senate and get rid of Harry Reid once and for all. This is our debate. The Democrats have had none. They've pretty much cleared the field for you-know-who. And they've got about $7 million in that war chest. I tell you, May 20th, you need to elect one of the 7 of us who is the most conservative, but who can win in November. That might not happen until July the 22nd. We may have a runoff. But I promise you that I will represent you, I will represent Georgia values, I I share your values. I'll fight for them every single day, and I'm uniquely qualified to do that. As I told you, I'm not a career politician. I'm a career physician. And I have made a pledge, an accountability pledge, not a lame pledge of term limits, but I put some skin in the game. I have said to you that I am willing to come home after one term if I can't repeal and replace Obamacare. Well, I need some help. We need to take over the Senate. We need the presidency in 2016. But then I've got 4 more years. If I can't do it, I will come home. But I'll fight every day to do that because it's what's killing jobs and destroying this country. God bless Macon. God bless Bibb County. Thank you all for coming. Vote Phil Gingrich, United States Senator.
Paul Brown.
Folks, this is a dragon. It's killing jobs. It's crushing our economy. It's robbing our children and our grandchildren of their future. It is a clear and present danger. And that dragon is big government. All the issues that you hear, the out-of-control spending, the unsustainable debt, all of those are symptoms. The diseases of big government that's just totally left its constitutional bounds. We've got to put that dragon back in its cage. And the cage bars are the enumerated powers of the U.S. Constitution. Since I've been in Washington, I've been voting constitutionally. Is it right? Do we need it? Can we afford it? 3 C's tell you who I am. I'm a conservative, constitutionalist Christian. I say no to the Department of Education. We've got to dismantle the federal government and get rid of the Department of Education and save those dollars and pay our teachers more. We've got to get rid of the EPA and the Department of Energy and the Department of Commerce. We've got to dismantle this unconstitutional government that's just totally out of control. Now you hear some of my opponents here talk as if we elect them, they're going to solve all the problems themselves. That's preposterous. What separates me from my 2 colleagues here? I've never requested an earmark. I've never voted for a stimulus package. I've never voted for a bailout. I've never voted to raise the debt ceiling. I've never voted to raise taxes. In fact, I believe if 10% is good enough for the Lord, it ought to be good enough for Uncle Sam. The only way we get there is to dismantle that federal government. And that's what I'll do as your U.S. Senator. Please vote all around for U.S. Senator.
Jack Kingston.
As a member of Congress, I have fought hard to consistently make Washington, D.C. our Georgia values. Hard work, frugality, and idealism. I haven't forgotten who I am or where I came from. I've come home every single weekend and gotten a great dose of reality. I had the highest rating from the NRA, A+. 100% from the National Federation of Independent Businesses, 96% from the American Conservative Union. Just recently, the National Journal said my voting record is the most conservative of anyone in Congress running for this race. I'll tell you a story. I'm a big Allman Brothers fan. I'm so glad to be here in their home. And several years ago, the band came to my office and said, we want money to renovate the Big House. Well, I'm a fan. I know what the Big House was. And yet, they wanted tax dollars for it. And I sat down with them and said, I got to tell you, I know all your songs, I know I have all your albums, all your CDs, but they were albums at the time. And this is not where tax dollars need to go. You guys can have a couple of concerts and raise the money that you need to renovate the Big House. Well, they walked out the door and I thought, that was that. 3 years later, they called me and said, we followed your advice. We raised the money privately. We have renovated the Big House. And we want you, a Republican, to give the speech at the ribbon cutting. And I can tell you, I could not have been more thrilled. My childhood favorite band, and I'm up there giving the speech. I got Greg, I got J-Mo, I got Derek Trucks, I got Butch Trucks. And you know what? We were talking Republican values. We were talking about how the system should work and ought to work and can work. I've never forgotten who I was and where I came from. Thank you very much. And if I'm in the U.S. Senate, I still won't forget, and I will always be fighting for you in our Georgia values. Thank you.
Whenever I get lost in my life, decisions I make, I always know that there's something I can return to get back on track. And that's my faith. This country, the people that we choose to represent us, to represent our states, they are off track. And we have allowed them to stay off track. There is one thing, though, that can get them back on track, and that is adhering to the Constitution. Two have boasted that they have a 90% constitutional voting record, the other 96. That's less than 100. Now, if having your rights violated 4% of the time or 10% of the time, if that's okay with you, vote for one of them. Now, if it's not okay with you, you have an opportunity tonight when you see them and shake their hand, ask them why Cisco, why indefinite detention, why the Patriot Act, why let them spy on us, why did Edward Snowden have to do your job for us and tell us we were being spied on. If that stuff is cool with you, keep doing what you've been doing. If you send me to D.C., it only takes one person to change a room. And one thing else I want to make clear, it's not that difficult if you take a flashlight with you and you expose the corruption that's taking place behind closed doors. And that is what we need to get this country back on track. Otherwise, we will continue down into that dark place. I hope we don't get there. I hope you will think about what I have said, do some homework, and it should be clear.
Thank you so much for the chance to be here tonight. I'm going to end where I began. That results matter. They matter. We've heard a lot of talk and a lot of rhetoric up here tonight about ratings and rankings and all the things that they're going to do. Ladies and gentlemen, the three congressmen have had a combined 42 years to do every single thing that they're talking about tonight, and they haven't done it. Jack and Phil forgot to mention that they voted for billions in earmarks for things like the Ted Kennedy Center, the Charlie Rangel Center, even the Bridge to Nowhere. And Paul, he does vote no, but he forgot to mention that he misses 75% of important committee meetings. Now, we need to have an individual who's going to be in Washington and who's going to be serious about doing the job of being the next United States Senator. The surest way to keep getting the more the same is to keep electing the same. If we want different results, we need different people. When I left home at 17, I never could have imagined what life was going to be like for me. I went to work, I worked hard, and I was able to move up the economic ladder. What I know is this, that a great God and an extraordinary country afforded a young girl tremendous opportunities to be whatever it is she wanted to be when she grew up. Ronald Reagan told our country shortly after he was elected that America's best days were ahead. I was just out on my own. And when he said those words, he spoke to a scared young girl who was out on her own sooner than she ever intended. And if America's best days were ahead, so too could be mine. I'm running for United States Senate because I want to make sure that America's best days are still ahead. I ask for your vote, but I'm going to work very hard to earn it. And then together, we are going to be focused on results and solving problems. We are going to have the guts and the resolve to do what we need to do to ensure that future generations, that they too have the opportunities that we've had to live in a nation of freedom and tremendous opportunities. Thank you, and God bless you.
Paul and Phil an opportunity to give a 30-second rebuttal if they would like to. So each of you. Phil, you want to start?
Martha, thank you very much. Karen, I take exception to that, like I take exception to that poster you put out in the hallway before we came in here. Since 2007, I have voted 10 times against raising the debt ceiling. 10 times against raising it $7 trillion. And 2 weeks ago, this shameful increase in the debt ceiling that our minority Republicans went along with no pay for us, I voted against, and I will continue to vote against that. We need a balanced budget minimum, or I'll never vote for an increase in debt.
Thank you. Bill, Paul, would you like to respond?
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to respond. I've been fighting for liberty, folks. I've been fighting to put this country back on the right track. I'm the chairman of the Investigation and Oversight Committee on Science, Space, and Technology. I'm on 3 committees. I can't go to all those committees, but I have staff that goes to all of them, so I know what's going on. What I'm trying to do is hold this government accountable. We're trying to stop the EPA. We're trying to stop the Department of Energy from fostering the kind of regulation that hurts our economy.
Thank you. And Jack Kingston, would you like 30 seconds?
Yes, we need leadership that unites, not leadership that divides. The best thing in the world for Barack Obama is a divided conservative family. I've introduced what I call the American Renewal Agenda. It's basically a 6-point plan that works like a contract with America. 3 main parts: strong national defense, balance of the budget, and jobs. I saw how Newt Gingrich was able to unite the Northeastern, the Western, and the Southern conservative Republicans. If we want to beat this administration, we have to be united.
Thank you
very much.
And now back to the closing statements. Art Gardner.
Thank you. I entered this race to try to fix the budget. The more I looked at it, the more alarmed I became. And I would suggest to you that if you're happy and content, don't study the budget because it's depressing. Now on my website, GardnerSenate.com, I have put a very detailed plan for fixing the budget. The other candidates don't do that. They talk in platitudes because it's tough. It's politically tough. In fact, when there was a question raised tonight about what are we going to do with defense spending, nobody would admit that we need to cut some defense spending as well. Now, there are 2 paths in front of our party. One path, which is advocated by most of the people on this stage, would continue to narrow our party. But I'm asking our party to take the other path, which will broaden our party and make our party the Big Tent party again. We need to attract women, minorities, and young people back to the party, especially young people. Now, we're all in this room probably fiscal conservatives, and we're probably all defense conservatives. But where we tend to differ is on the social issues. And I'm asking that we agree to disagree on social issues so that we can produce candidates who can attract young people back to the party in big numbers. That's the future. Because if we don't, we're going to start losing a lot of elections. We're going to lose elections nationally. We're going to lose elections in Georgia eventually. And we, the Republican Party, are the only thing that stands between the destruction of our country and the Democrat agenda. We've got to beat the Democrats. We cannot let them win. So we need to broaden our base, appeal to a larger group of people. That means we need to allow candidates in our party who are not always social conservatives. That's the winning recipe. That'll win in this race. It'll win nationally. And I ask for your vote and your support.
Thank you. David Perdue.
You know, the 4 politicians in this race have been in elected office for 63 years. Seriously, if they were going to make a difference, wouldn't they have already done it by now? I've never run for public office, but I've spent the last 40 years in the real world. I understand the global free economic system. I understand how you generate economic growth, which creates quality jobs. They don't. They're nice people, but they just don't have that experience. Real change sometimes takes an outside perspective, keen eyes, determination, a bucket load of common sense. That's what I'll take to the U.S. Senate. When Harry Reid can exempt his staff from Obamacare, we need an outsider to change that. When our national debt becomes the greatest threat to our national security, we need an outsider to change that. If I can put the world on our iPhone, Why can't we get our kids educated? If we can bring down the Soviet Union with the strength of our economy and the power of our ideas, why can't we fix this economic crisis we're in and get America working again? We can. The problem is we can't do it with the same type of people who created the mess in the first place. It just seems to me that the decision in this race is very simple. If you like what's going on in Washington, you've got 4 perfectly good traditional professional politicians from which to choose. However, if you're as outraged as I am about the size and scope of our federal government, about the amount of money they take from our pockets, and about the childish, inexcusable behavior that's exhibited in Washington every day, then I hope you'll give this outsider from Middle Georgia a chance. Fixing big problems is what I've done all my life. If we want different results in Washington, we have to simply send a different type of person to Washington. I'm David Perdue, and I want to be your next United States Senator. Thank you.
I want to thank you all for coming tonight and being involved in this community and in this event, but I want to remind you, around 30,000 of you around the state of Georgia will attend a meeting like this sometime between now and the primary. About 750,000 of you are going to vote in the primary. It's going to be very important that you talk to your friends and your neighbors about what you heard here tonight. Also, it's going to be very important, as I said at the beginning, that at the end of this primary process, when one of these nominees are your Republican nominee and they are broke and battered and bruised because of this runoff and primary cycle, that you get behind this nominee. We cannot continue to be one strike and you're out people. And we have to get behind a Republican need. Fights are for primaries. After you get through the primary, you get behind your party person. If that party person wins and they don't do what you like, you primary them next time. That's the way we do things, and that's what's going to help win elections. We also want everybody to be involved at the Georgia GOP. You can go to georgiagop.org, as well as be involved in your local Republican Party or your Republican women. I am proud to be the president of the Republican Women of Hall, and I am so happy to be involved because we know the women get the work done in these campaigns. So, that's what happens here. Now, I have here in my little hand the straw poll results. So, you guys want me to announce them, right? Okay. All right, for governor, Nathan Deal, 476 votes. John Barge, 66 votes. David Pennington, 77 votes. State Senate, District 18, John Kennedy, 108 votes. Spencer Price, 228 votes. So Spencer Price won that one. School superintendent, where everybody in Georgia is running in that race. The winner is Kira Willis with 252 votes. Mary Kay got, and I'm not going to try to pronounce her last name until I learn how to do it, got 25, Ashley Bell 39, Mike Buck 4, Alan Ford 10, Cheryl Dawes 2, Nancy Jester 78, Fitz Johnson 27, and Richard Woods 13. In PSC District 4, Douglas Kidd got 221 votes, Bubba McDonald got 128, and Craig Lutz got 18. And State House District 141, Alan Peake 290 votes, Bradley Moriarty, 55 votes. And now for the U.S. Senate race, Karen Handel received 343 votes, David Perdue received 270 votes, Paul Brown received 37 votes, Art Gardner 8, Phil Gingrey 128, Derek Grayson 3, Jack Hageston 85. So Karen Handel wins.